This is the third episode in our season focused on family advocates and the effects of the MMIP, Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Crisis, in the United States. This episode discusses crime scene details and homicide. Listener discretion is advised. This is The Fall Line. In the fall of 2024, we began our coverage of a number of cases from New Mexico. Some were brought to our attention by lawyer and advocate Darlene Gomez. Darlene has been working with many families who are struggling for media attention and investigative movement for their loved ones' cases. One of the most disturbing situations she alerted us to was the unsolved double homicide of two men, Candrick Begay and Anthony McCants, who'd been murdered while at work at an auto salvage yard in Farmington. They were both employed by Highway 64 Auto Salvage, a business that offers new and used vehicle parts plus installs. A salvage yard can supply a customer a part for just about any car, and that can mean that employees need to go pretty far out into the property to locate the right make and model to match a particular order. It was April 5th, 2023, when Candrick, 31, and Anthony, 26, did just that. According to KOAT7, quote, McCants and Begay were told to pull parts off vehicles in the yard at 4 p.m. That was only a few hours from the official closing time, which, per the business website, is 6 p.m. It was a task that both men would have been familiar with, especially Anthony. He'd been with the salvage yard for a few years. Candrick, he was a temporary worker. It had been slow in his professional field of ironwork, and he wanted to be sure he was bringing in steady income while he waited for his next big construction job. His wife, Celeste, was pregnant, and they had 3 other children. He expected to be back to out-of-town construction work soon, but for the meantime, he was full-time at Highway 64 to be sure that his family was taken care of. Anthony McCants had a family too, a wife and stepchildren who counted on him coming home. That's why they were both missed so soon. Nothing seemed amiss when Candrick and Anthony went out to pull parts in the salvage yard, but 2 hours later, when the business day ended, they had not returned to the main building. According to a San Juan County Sheriff's Office press release regarding the events, quote, later that evening, employees began to look for the two when family members called, concerned that they hadn't heard from them. Employees began to search the large area and located them on the property. When they discovered Anthony and Candrick in a rear portion of the yard, they called 911. San Juan officials arrived on scene at approximately 9 p.m. to investigate. According to the Journal, Candrick and Anthony had both been shot in the back by an unknown assailant, with no suspected motive shared with the media. Officers did a search, and they discovered shoe impressions, which may or may not have been related to the crime, and they collected at least, quote, 28 pieces of evidence, which are redacted from the incident report. We do know, though, that a bullet casing was found at the scene. The San Juan Sheriff's Office began to investigate, but as weeks and then months passed, scattered news coverage featured calls to the public for help as law enforcement was facing issues. There were no signs of a motive and still no suspects. And according to KRQE, officials said that, quote, a lack of technology has made the case harder to solve. One official told the news station, quote, there are not cameras in those open areas like that, so that's what makes this more difficult. Those are the bare bones of what happened, and what hasn't happened, since April 5th, 2023, in the search for answers in the double homicide of Candrick Begay and Anthony McCants. But there's more to how things unfolded that spring, and since then, too. That's what Celeste Henderson, the wife of Candrick Begay, told us in an interview this winter as we prepared this story for air. It's important to her that his case stays in the media and that people know as much as possible about her husband, who he was, and how she's been fighting for him since. Maybe that will finally push this case forward. Both families have been waiting for close to 2 years now, an agonizing 2 years, without them. Diane, Anthony McCants' grandmother, described her grandson to KRQE as, quote, a really happy, loving, smiling young man, and said, you never expect for your 26-year-old grandson to go before you. Though we were only able to speak with Celeste Henderson, Candrick's wife, for this episode, and to tell Candrick's story, justice for him will also be justice for Anthony, As a San Juan sheriff's official told KRQE last January, quote, "The reality is we got two young men that went to work that day to provide for their families and did not come home based on a horrible act caused by somebody else, and it is crucial to us to get that person off the street." But so far, that day has not come. Just a few weeks ago, Celeste posted a video to her social media accounts with a new statement for the public. She's now asking for a meeting with the governor, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and for assistance from the Navajo Nation in attaining a re-examination of her husband's case. In order to attract that level of attention, she needs your help. In the video, Celeste says, quote, "Candrick's life mattered. Candrick Patrick Begay. Don't forget his name. To help you understand, we want you to know who Candrick was, to Celeste, to his children, and to his community." Celeste said that she and Candrick met when they were young, barely teenagers, really. He'd grown up in Ticnos Post, Arizona, before he moved to Shiprock, New Mexico, so they hadn't known each other as children. But Celeste told us that right from the start, there was a connection.
We met when I was only 15, and we went to high school together, so that's how we met, just passing notes to each other. I just thought he's handsome. I remember I tried to talk to him, but he was just like, did not want anything to do with me at the time. And I remember at that school, we were doing an activity and we got separated. It was like an icebreaker activity. We had to go and talk to other students. And I remember going and talking to him, thinking it was my opportunity to talk to him. But I asked him, hey, because the activity was to draw an animal. And I asked him if he could draw a horse. And he was like, I don't know how to draw. And just turned back away. And I was just like, okay. And I just turned back around and sat back down. But yeah, and I felt so embarrassed because I was like standing up in class, like trying to talk to him. And he's like, I don't know how to draw. And the funny thing is, he was a very talented drawer. Like, he drew all the time. I just took it as like being rejected. I was like, oh, okay. And he would walk around with a girl, and I didn't notice that at the time when I tried talking to him. So after he rejected me, I used to think, oh, well, that's his girlfriend. Little did I know that was his little sister. And as through time, because we had a biology together after that first interaction we had, and then we had biology together, and that's just where it started from, was our biology class. We got to know each other more. So he sat like across the classroom from me, and yeah, we just started talking, and I was the one that ended up asking him out after we had exchanged numbers. And yeah, and he said yes, and then the rest is history. We fell in love very quickly. Like, we didn't want to be separate from each other. We were always together. I just remember falling for him more when he would drive his truck, because at the time I was going to high school. My dad was going back to school too, so he would work during the day and go to classes at night. So my dad would come to my school because he'd get off almost the same time I would get out of school. So my dad would come, he would park, he would do his homework, and then he would go to sleep. And then I would drive us home. And so my dad would be asleep on the side, and then I'd be driving outside of Shiprock with Candrick driving right next to me. And once he started staying with me because of family issues at the time, he started living with me, and I live out here on the reservation. So we would ride horses, we would go ride our bikes out, or just go on a hike. And at the time, he had a nice truck, so we would just take drives. But yeah, he was very adventurous, even as a kid. He lived down on the reservation down in Tees, Arizona, Tees Nuspas. And he'd be climbing up those hills, running around. He'd never be inside. You wouldn't catch Candrick just loafing on the couch watching TV. He's always had to be doing something. I was a bad kid, I'll be honest. So I really didn't have much friends. And quite honestly, the things that we did do, you're not supposed to be doing at that age. So when I met Kendrick, he really settled me down. He showed me a different part, like because at the time he was growing up without electricity. At the time, his dad worked out of town a lot, and there is a waiting list to get electricity on or even to get an electricity pole with NTUA. And I believe he was just trying to pay that off, but they were just to get on that waiting list. So it had been some time because I know here on the reservation, it takes a while, at least up to maybe even a month, to get electricity hooked up. Like, say, some, like my neighbors, for instance, they had gotten a manufactured home. And it took a while for them to get electricity. They had to build the outhouse in the back.
Celeste said that Candrick, one of the three eldest children in his family, was used to responsibility. He helped to raise his younger siblings, and he worked hard around the home to contribute to his family. Because Candrick had learned how to do so much for himself, he began to teach Celeste too.
He showed me how to dig holes. That was one thing. I don't know what it was about him digging holes. He used to say that, and so at the time when we would fix the fence line, and he showed me how to chop wood and just little things around the house, how to fix this and that. Like, he showed me a lot.
After about a year of dating, Candrick moved in with Celeste's family, and she says that happened gradually. He just spent more and more time with her family until one day he never left.
So we lived together since we were 16. We were very young. I can't imagine my son living with somebody right now. He's about to be 15. I'm like, oh boy, can't imagine you living with anybody right now. As young kids, especially on a reservation, you do deal with a lot of family issues. And so that's what led him to live with us. And my family really were there for us. My dad, taught him things. My mom taught him things, like, especially like if we would, get into little arguments, my mom and dad would step in and be like, you don't go to sleep mad as you are, as mad as you are to him. And she would, vice versa, she would say the same thing to him. You say you're sorry and you love one another, but you don't ever go to bed mad at each other. And so they were really there too. They helped us get through our rough patches. My dad helped Kendrick through a lot of things. And yeah, we really had the support of my family. He really had softened me because at the time I was a loose cannon. So, there'd be times I get mad out of nowhere. But he would talk to me, or even just me watching him, how he would react to certain things, it wouldn't bother him like how I guess it would bother me. And so I learned from that to like not take things too serious. And he would always say, "It's not that serious, bro." And so I tell myself that now, when I'm facing hard days and I feel agitated, or it's funny because my daughter started saying that. And she is a spitting image of her dad. But yeah, he softened me in ways that I didn't know. He showed me things, and he didn't even know he was showing me because I was just watching him. And then I found out I was pregnant a year into our relationship. It was totally unplanned. I did not know I was pregnant. I started feeling sick in the morning, and That's where the telltale signs were there. So I had taken a pregnancy test at my school at the time because career prep was actually a school for like I guess misfits, like kids that were failing a lot or it was for teen parents. So we did have a daycare there at the school. So they also had a clinic there inside of the school so girls could get the prenatal visits there in school or they could get seen and get birth control there. Or you could even get tested for STIs and stuff. So I went there to our school-based clinic and told them my symptoms, and told them I was late. And then I got a pregnancy test, and then that's how I found out. I was so scared to tell my mom. I didn't tell her right away after my mom got over the anger stage. She became more supportive. And along with my dad as well. They got in my corner. They were there. They were supporting me. And then same with school. After I started doing parenting classes there, which is something they offer to new parents. So Kendrick and I would take parenting classes there. I believe it was the first trimester we did that. They really supported teen parents there at the school, so that's where we were able to go.
Becoming parents at such a young age is a lot for any couple to face, but the support of both school and Celeste's parents made things much easier. And Candrick was excited too. Celeste says that he slipped easily into the role of fatherhood.
I remember it from even when I was in labor. He was so hands-on. He would rub my back, rub my feet. He was by my side through the whole thing, pulling my underwear up when I had to go to the restroom, standing there, holding me as I had a contraction. He was there. He was my partner. And seeing him become a dad, he almost blacked out. When our son came out, he was just like, oh my gosh. He said he felt dizzy. I just seen him like blinking his eyes a lot. I didn't realize, like, I guess he was on the verge of blacking out. And he seen our son and he just started crying. He held him. He cut his umbilical cord. And from that day on, he was always there for his kids. He'd be playing with them. He'd be out there doing things with them. He was a very hands-on father. Even he took us on the road a couple of times when he was working out of town. And so the kids got to see that, got to see what their dad did. And he would just talk to them, show them a lot of things, and working on things. Like our oldest, when it came to him being old enough to learn how to chop wood, that's what he would teach him. Go get wood, go get coal. He was a very hands-on father.
They stayed close to Celeste's parents, which meant that Candrick could help them out too, something that he was always happy to do. Candrick was aware that they'd been there for him when he was a teenager. But even more than that, Celeste says that he was the kind of person who naturally built connections, and he kept them. He was shy at first, but once he warmed up, people loved him, and he loved them back.
He always had that big smile on his face and he was very helpful. Like if he seen my dad outside getting wood or anything, or knew that my parents needed wood because we lived in separate homes. I had a trailer just below my mom's house, and then my parents live above us. And so if he would see my dad outside chopping wood, he would go out there and finish it off for him and then make sure the wood pile is fully stocked. And he would do the same with coal. Or if we're, having a family gathering, he's out there helping. Or, any type of family function. He was very hands-on. For the most part, anywhere he worked, he made relationships, friendships, different job sites. He had different friends here and there. When he had passed away, I had a few of his coworkers or old coworkers that had mentioned him and told me, the things that they did together. Like there's this story about where they saved a dog, a stray dog. Well, Kendrick's coworker, he used to work at Nappy, and that's like an agriculture place up here. They do like farming. They distribute hay. And that's where Kendrick was working at the time. He would throw bales of hay and load up people's vehicles with hay. And his coworker used to feed a stray dog that would come around, and it was a mama dog, and he would feed that mom dog. And one day, I guess she didn't come around, and his coworker asked Kendrick if he seen the dog. And, they both got together and said no, they hadn't seen a dog. So they both went looking for this dog. And I guess Kendrick had found it behind a bale of hay, and it was like stuck in there, and it was upside down, and it was on the verge of passing away. So they took the dog out of the hay, and I guess Kendrick was helping him, pouring water on the dog and just making sure the dog was comfortable. And then I guess after that, he started saying, "How come you didn't ask us for help? How come you didn't yell for us? You know that we feed you." I guess he was like talking to the dog. But that was a story that stuck with me about one of his coworkers, and it just makes me laugh every time because I could just hear Kendrick's voice, his tone, how he was doing it. I can just envision that in my head.
That dog lived because of Candrick's care. Celeste, she wasn't surprised to hear that story. It was just how he worked. He took care of everything and everyone that came into contact with him, especially her. As their family grew, Candrick wanted to learn a trade so that he could support his children. And according to Celeste, ironwork was an obvious career choice for her husband. His own father was an ironworker, and he'd wanted to follow in his footsteps. He was specifically a rod buster for major construction sites. It was work that often took him on the road for days or even weeks at a time. He enjoyed it, and Celeste told us that, quote, he was definitely a natural, and he was good at what he did.
So a rod buster is the ones that they basically just tie wires out all day. I don't know what they're called, but I just know they look like mesh before they pour the concrete. So they kind of set the foundation. He also connected walls because during that time he would also go and connect the beams and stuff. So he'd be up there as well. We used to call him a cowboy in the sky. I think the furthest he's been up was like at least 5 stories.
So he liked the work, and it provided for his family. But there could be gaps between jobs. That was the case in the spring of 2023, when he took on temporary work at Highway 64 Salvage.
He was put on hold, because sometimes as an iron worker or a construction worker, you have those periods of where there's no work. So that's where we were at. And there was a job coming up in Durango. So he was set to be there that following week. And so he wanted to go to work to raise money for our daughter's birthday because her birthday was 2 days after he passed away. So that was our whole plan. He was just trying to get money together for her birthday.
Celeste says that Candrick didn't notice anything concerning about the salvage yard. There were no break-ins or dangerous conditions that he mentioned, except for one instance when he suspected another employee of using drugs. But that was an isolated incident, and he didn't fear for his safety or worry about going to work. He did not know his other coworkers well. He just hadn't been there long. So Celeste, she didn't know them either. However, Anthony, whom Candrick was working with April 5th, he was an established member of the team, and that would be important later. Celeste explained that on April 5th, 2023, Candrick and Anthony were assigned to a task that they completed regularly, finding specific parts for an order. It was a process that had pre-established steps, so both employees and employers would know who was working on what at any given time.
An employee had asked them to pull this part, so they write that information on what part needs to be pulled, and the employees that are going to go and pull it, they sign off on that sheet. So that day, Candrick and Anthony signed off on the part that needed to be pulled, and they were sent out into the yard.
Based on local reporting, the part that they needed was on a truck in the south area of the salvage yard, and that's where the men headed. They went in search of it at about 4 p.m., but didn't return. Celeste had no idea that Candrick hadn't returned with the part. She was waiting for Candrick to pull up to the house like he always did. She says that he usually left at 5 or 5:30, a little before the listed closing time for the yard, and that his drive home was about an hour.
I had actually tried to text him. It was a little after 4 p.m. that day that he had stopped messaging me. And that was very unusual because we always text each other back and forth. We're always texting each other back and forth. And it just went silent. And I figured, he's busy right now, give him some time. And then as the time went on, I knew that it was quitting time and I still haven't heard from him. I kept trying to call him in that time frame too, and it just kept going to voicemail.
So, when did you start getting worried?
Around 7, because I was like, maybe I'm just being paranoid. I'll just give him some time, because in my head, I'm like, well, he's only 30 minutes late because this is the time he's usually back. And then 7:15 came around and my son and we kept pacing the floor. He kept looking out for the car. We would see a vehicle pull off the highway and, he would hope that was his dad. And time went on and I just told my son, I said, can you watch your younger siblings? I said, I got to go see what's going on. I have to find out what's going on. And so my son said yes. And on the way up to Highway 64, I called my sister and I asked her to call the hospitals. During that time, I was checking the jail site, just for anything.
Celeste's drive there took about an hour. She tried calling the business's phone number, but couldn't reach anyone. And because she didn't know any of Candrick's coworkers, she couldn't reach out to them.
So I drove through Kirtland, and it's a little community, a little town. And I remember seeing 2 police officers parked right there by Subway. I drove there to Highway 64, and there was a gentleman because I pulled up. I was driving a white Ford truck, so I'm assuming they probably thought I was the police because as I pulled up, they opened up the gate for me, and I seen I seen our car still parked there, and I'm on the phone with my sister, and I'm like, oh, he's still here. And then I looked at Highway 64. I looked at the building, and it was an eerie feeling. Just, I knew something wasn't right. I seen all the employees, and I told my sister on the phone, I said, wait, I think something happened here. I think something happened here at Highway 64. And I drove up. The lights were on in the business. There were employees. There was quite a bit of employees just pacing around the floor. I parked the vehicle. And just as I parked, Anthony's wife had pulled up behind me. And at the time, I didn't know her. So she pulled up and she jumped out and it looked like she was crying. She was asking these 2 employees where Anthony was. And they said, no, you don't want to see him, were their exact words. I knew something was wrong because Anthony was training Candrick. My heart dropped and I walked up to them. I ran basically up to them. She kept pleading with them to see him. They kept telling her, no, you don't want to see him that way. And then I asked where Candrick was. I said, where's Candrick? Where's Candrick? And then one of the gentlemen looked at me and he had this like sorry look in his eyes, like he couldn't look at me. He started like trying to comfort himself. He put his hands over his on his neck and he was just rocking back and forth. And then I kept asking, where is he? Is he okay? And he just shook his head. I started crying. And then I just took off. Like I could not just stand there and take this news. I had to go and find Candrick. Mind you, I was 6 months pregnant at this time. So I took off. I went into the junkyard and it felt like the coldest night in April. I remember yelling for his name. I remember my teeth clenching and I was shaking and this adrenaline was running through me and I kept praying. I kept praying. I kept praying. I kept begging. I kept begging. And I was going in the wrong direction. And just then I turned around because I had seen headlights. And then I started walking in that direction. And little did I know it was the cops. So I was walking down and I had met up with Anthony's wife and she kept trying to call Anthony's phone and we were walking together. And then she just kept saying, I hope I hear his phone. Like, I hope I hear his phone. Maybe he's okay. That's when a cop told us that we needed to go because we were getting near where it had happened. And they told us that they were closing down the junkyard, that it was a crime scene. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I wonder if a car fell on him. What if, that's what my mind was thinking. And I was just crying. I was just hoping because during this time, nobody told me anything. Nobody told me what had happened. Nobody. And I cried. And I remember I started calling family to tell them that something bad happened here at Highway 64. Well, I called my mom. And then as I was sitting in the car, someone knocked on my window and said they wanted to tell me what happened. So I got off the phone and I went into the office and one of the employees that found him told me that they were shot. At first, I misunderstood because it sounded like he said they shot each other. And I'm thinking, like, how did he get a gun? And then another individual came up to me and told me that they were both shot and killed. And that's how I found out. And so I just remember walking out of the office and I went into the vehicle. And then that's when I called my mom back and I told my mom that he was dead. I remember that was the words that came out of my mouth. I was screaming to my mom. I remember saying, Mom, he's dead. And I was asking her to help me, but my mom at the time, they had taken a trip up to Idaho. So she and my dad drove home that night from Idaho. That's how I found out.
According to Celeste, Candrick and Anthony were discovered because Anthony's wife raised the alarm with their coworkers. As we said, Celeste had tried too, but she hadn't been able to reach anyone.
Anthony's wife was calling the coworkers, and then that's how we raised awareness on that issue. And then they had asked for one of the employees that lived nearby to go check the yard because Candrick and Anthony were still there, or to check to see if they were still there. So their vehicles were still there. And so they went out looking for them and they were trying to find out which yard they went into because that place is a big area. They found out, or I guess they just went looking, and that's how they found them.
Per the journal, the investigation of the scene where Candrick and Anthony were found, it took all night. As we said at the beginning of the episode, at least 28 pieces of evidence were collected. That might be why Celeste recalls that she was not interviewed or spoken to individually that evening. We did reach out for comment on this case, but as of the time of this recording, we have not received a reply. That night, Celeste says, it was confusing and frightening to wait without information, and her children, they were waiting at home. She was 6 months pregnant, and she'd just found out that her husband had been murdered.
No detective, no police, no law enforcement ever came up to me and talked to me. In fact, they talked to us all together. They were like, you guys are going to be here all night if you choose to stay, but this is an investigation. So they basically just made a public announcement in front of everybody. They told us that it's an ongoing investigation. There's really nothing that we can do being there. So they told us just to go home. And then the police officer had told Anthony's wife and I that a police officer or detective would be contacting us like the next day.
It was Celeste's family that got her home that night. They didn't want her driving alone or telling the children what had happened by herself either. The next morning, she felt driven to head back out and try to find out more. She still knew almost nothing about what had happened to Candrick.
I needed to know answers, so I asked my mom to take me to Highway 64 because they wouldn't leave me. My mom, in fact, stayed here at the house with us, and she drove me around. And she took care of me those days because I was a wreck. But she drove me to Highway 64 the next day, and there was still nothing I could do. But the owner had asked us if we wanted to see where he had passed away, what had happened. And we went back there. We seen the blood. We seen what happened, and I just remember crying. And it was during that time as well, I had to identify him to OMI because they had all his information wrong. I was trying to call up there and I wasn't getting any word back, so I left a voicemail, and I finally got a call back during that time when we were in a junkyard, and I had to identify him, and I gave them the correct social security number. I gave them the correct date of birth, and that's how I identified him. I believe it was the day after, like 2 days after, I believe. That's when we met with the detective. I believe it was 2 days after his death because we went over things and they were, asking us questions about if he had enemies and things like that.
Celeste knew that she didn't have answers for them. Candrick didn't have enemies or involvement in anything that would have led anyone to want to come after him. He and Anthony, they barely knew each other. And as far as she knew, Anthony was also a husband and father who went to work and went home. If the motive was robbery, they'd be unlikely targets as well. They weren't carrying anything expensive related to the business. She hoped that answers would come soon, but meanwhile, she had to face reality, the death of her husband, and mourning him, and helping her children through it.
It was a blur for me the days following because we didn't bury him right away. I believe it was close to a week after he passed away, we finally got to bury him. So I was a wreck. Everything was a blur to me during this time.
And you were 6 months pregnant.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And then I had a 3-year-old at that time. She's 5 now, but she was 3 at the time. That she kept asking me, "Where's Dad?"
As the weeks passed, though, it soon became clear that there was not much information forthcoming. As we noted earlier in the episode, there weren't cameras in that area of the salvage yard. We don't know what, if any, DNA evidence was found. Our FOIA fulfillment did not cover that information, and our request for comment, as we said, was not answered at the time of this episode's recording. In the weeks, and then months, after the murders of Candrick and Anthony, the media released a number of stories reminding residents of the double homicide and featuring a call for any tips or leads that could bring their killer or killers to justice. Soon, it was time for an anniversary article on the case, and still, no resolution. But now, nearly 2 years have passed, and that lead has still not come in. Celeste says that her grief is still present every day, but it now battles with an equal amount of frustration. She knows that there's someone out there who could end this and bring some justice for her husband and for Anthony if they simply had the courage to come forward. It's why she made the decision to speak to the media 2 years ago, and why she's continuing to post on every social media platform that she can, even when it's painful to speak.
That's one of the reasons why I continue to post like the heartfelt messages, because I want people to feel what I feel, and in hopes of someone talking, someone tired of holding this secret. That's the main reason why I speak about his case and continue to go and talk about him, is in hopes that somebody talks and speaks up. I know someone knows something, and I know they're too afraid to talk about it, or they're just being cowards. But yes, someone knows something.
Celeste is glad that her husband's name has stayed in the local media, but the stories have been brief. She'd like to see more detailed and extensive coverage, and national coverage as well, something that, she says, is harder to get from men, especially Indigenous men.
It's kind of the situation here. You know, a lot of men go missing and there's hardly any coverage about it. Or someone is murdered and they just released a news clip one day and it's gotten forgotten the next day. I mean, it's sad because that's kind of how it was with Candrick's case. At least it feels like. I didn't feel much support from my community. Just until recently when I started getting my voice. I seen some people stand behind me, but I totally understand that feeling of not getting the help that you want or need and just feeling alone.
Like other family members that we've featured recently, Celeste says that she's found community among the loved ones of other missing and murdered Indigenous people, like Vanjie Randall Shorty, the mother of Zachariah Juan Shorty. His story was featured in season 19 of The Fall Line.
So I've actually become a part of a group. It's called Four Corners Family and Advocates. And they're families of people that were murdered or had gone missing around here. So they became like my second family. They really become my rock. Evangeline Randall, her son he went missing, and then they found him deceased in the reservation in Ninahinzad. But with her, she has really been one of my biggest supporters. She actually came to Kendrick's viewing and started giving me resources, pointing me in the right direction on where to go. She even told me that I need to get in contact with KOAT, get his story out there. She kept telling me that. And I really developed a strong friendship and a relationship with them. They're my second family. And those are the families of the murdered and missing here in the Four Corners. We've come together and talk about issues. Sometimes we just cry together, or we just have a meal together.
We told you at the beginning of the episode that Celeste wants people to remember the name Candrick Begay, to acknowledge that his life mattered, and to help push for answers that her family desperately needs. Here is what she wants you to know most about him.
So With Candrick, I just want everybody to know that they took a great father, a great husband, a brother, an uncle, a son. They really broke a lot of hearts. That day they decided to commit this senseless act. All he was doing was working to collect money for our daughter's birthday. My daughter sat there blowing out her candles, wishing her father was there. That's all she wanted for her birthday. That pain is there. They broke these little babies' hearts. And now my son has to grow up not knowing how great his father really was. And it breaks my heart because my babies, I feel like the memories of their father are gonna fade because they were young when they lost him. But that pain is there. They broke a lot of hearts. They took a great person that could never be replaced away. And for what? For nothing. He was my person. He really was. It was half my life that I spent with him, so learning to live without him has been the most difficult thing I've ever had to do. And as far as the case, there's one thing I'm always going to say is if you know something, say something. How can you not hear those gunshots in the late afternoon and question what that was? How can you clock out and drive off the property, lock that gate, and still see their vehicles parked there? It doesn't make sense. Someone knows something.
As of February 2025, Celeste is actively seeking meetings with New Mexico officials, including the governor, regarding Candrick's case. She needs support on social media and for local media to continue to follow his case. As we said, she recently released a video statement, which you can view on our social media, outlining her frustrations with his case and what support she needs from New Mexico law enforcement and officials. To support Celeste, share her video and Candrick's story as far and as wide as you can. It's helpful to share the podcast, but most of all, we need you to ask local New Mexico and national reporters to cover the double homicide of Candrick Begay and Anthony McCants. Social media is a powerful tool, and it's right there at your fingertips. It only takes minutes to send an email, but it means the world to families who are still waiting for answers. We'll have suggestions as to who you might contact on our social media post for the episode. If you have any information regarding the homicides of Candrick Begay and Anthony McCants, please contact the San Juan County Sheriff's Office tip line at 505-333-7878. No bit of information is too small. You may have heard something or seen something that night that will help investigators solve their murders. Next time on The Fall Line, the disappearance of Kaylee Mae Nelson Jerry. We hope you'll join us then. If you know of a case that should be covered on The Fall Line, there's a link to our case submission form in the show notes. Thank you for listening. The Fall Line is an independent podcast, and we appreciate listener support. It allows us to do research, obtain FOIA, pay our content advisors, and support and donate to the causes we care about. If you try out the products we advertise, please use our sponsor codes. It really helps. And please take a moment to rate and review our show in your podcast app of choice. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to check your subscription to make sure you're set for automatic downloads so that you don't miss an episode. My book, Lay Them to Rest, which covers years of my life working on a Jane Doe case, is out everywhere now. It's a hardcover, ebook, and audiobook. You can order it anywhere you get your books and through your local library. Find out more in the link in our show notes. And if you'd like to support the show and the stories we cover, join us on Patreon or Apple Premium. 100% of our Patreon and Apple Premium earnings are supporting our Family Therapy Fund and actively paying for therapy for families who appeared on the show. On Patreon, you can get early release, ad-free versions of our regular episodes for $5 a month. If you prefer Apple Premium, you can subscribe there as well. On Patreon, we also post occasional giveaways, updates, and blogs, which all patrons can enjoy, starting at just $1. The Fall Line is written, hosted, and researched by Laura Norton, with additional research assistance by Melissa Gold, interviews by Brooke Hargrove, produced, engineered, and scored by Maura Curry, content advisement by Vic Kennedy and Brandy C. Williams. Special thanks to Liz Lipka.